I was working the front desk at a hotel in Amsterdam when an American family checked in around midnight. The dad looked exhausted. He dropped his bags and asked me where he could grab dinner. I told him most restaurants closed hours ago. He stared at me like I'd just told him the earth was flat. Closed? It's only midnight. What kind of city closes at midnight? I explained that in Amsterdam and most of Europe, restaurants close between 10 and 11 on weeknights. He shook his head. Back home, I can get a steak at 2 in the morning. This is insane, his wife chimed in. Do you have a 24-hour diner nearby? I pointed them toward a kebab shop 3 blocks away. They left looking confused and hungry. These kinds of moments say a lot about how we see the world. And that's exactly what I unpack here each week. If you care more about understanding culture than just judging it, you'll want to stay tuned. That same week, another guest asked me why we didn't have ice in the lobby. Ice? For what? I asked. She looked at me like I was the confused one. For drinks. You know, cold drinks? I explained we had a small ice machine on the 3rd floor, but most Europeans don't use much ice. She seemed genuinely shocked. How do you drink soda without ice? It's warm. That's disgusting. I told her our drinks come cold from the fridge. She didn't look convinced. Then there was the guy who tried to tip me 20 euros for carrying his luggage upstairs. I politely refused. He insisted. Come on, take it. You earned it. I explained that tipping isn't expected in the Netherlands for basic services. Wages are fair here. He put the cash on the counter anyway and walked off. I had to chase him down to give it back. He looked offended. Why won't you take my money? Are you insulted? I wasn't insulted. I just didn't need a tip for doing my job. He left muttering something about European pride. My coworker told me about a woman who asked if we accepted dollars at checkout. Not as a joke. She was serious. When my coworker said no, only euros, the woman sighed loudly. I thought Europe was modern. My coworker had to explain that every country has its own currency standards, and no, the US dollar isn't universal. The woman paid with her card, but she wasn't happy about it. These weren't isolated incidents. Every week we'd get new stories. Americans confused about meal times, baffled by the lack of free refills, or surprised that we didn't have air conditioning blasting in every room. Most of them were polite, just genuinely surprised that Europe operates differently. And honestly, that's what made it funny. Not the confusion itself, but the assumption that the whole world runs on American systems. So I started collecting these stories. From friends, co-workers, people I met traveling. Turns out, Europeans everywhere have similar experiences. And they're too good not to share. My friend worked at a train station in Brussels. One afternoon, an American couple approached the ticket counter looking stressed. The husband asked, "Do you have tickets for the 2:15 train to Paris?" My friend checked the schedule. "There's a train at 14:15. That's probably the one you want?" The man frowned. "No, 2:15. In the afternoon." My friend nodded. "Yes, that's 14:15. We use 24-hour time here." The wife jumped in. "Why would you do that?" "It's so confusing. Just say 2:15 like normal people." My friend stayed calm. "It actually removes confusion. 14:15 is always afternoon. No need to say AM or PM." The husband wasn't convinced. "Well, in America, we just know what 2:15 means." They bought the tickets, but spent 5 minutes double-checking the time on their phones. Another traveler asked my friend if the train had power outlets for American plugs. My friend said no. European trains use European outlets. The guy looked annoyed. Why doesn't Europe just use the same plugs as everyone else? My friend raised an eyebrow. Europe invented electrical standards before America did, and there's no universal plug. Every region has its own. The guy muttered something about globalization and walked away. I track patterns like this constantly. The small misunderstandings that reveal bigger cultural mindsets. If that kind of observation speaks to you, this is the channel to follow. I met a bartender in Munich who told me about an American tourist who ordered a Coke. She brought him a small glass bottle. He looked at it and asked, "Where's the rest of it?" She didn't understand. He pointed at the bottle. "This is like 6 ounces. I want a large." She explained that a standard soda in Germany is typically 300 milliliters, about 10 ounces. Refills aren't free, and drinks are priced per bottle. He seemed stunned. "So if I want more, I have to pay again?" She nodded. He shook his head. "That's a scam. In the States, refills are free and the cups are huge." She smiled politely. "Here, we don't drink as much soda, and free refills encourage waste." He paid for 3 bottles that night and complained about the price every time. A waitress in Rome told me she once served a couple who asked for the check after their meal. When she brought it, they looked confused. "Why isn't the tip included?" one of them asked. She explained that in Italy, there's sometimes a small cover charge, but tipping isn't required. If they wanted to leave something, €1 or 2 was generous. The other person looked shocked. €1? We'd tip at least 20% back home. That's the standard. The waitress explained that servers in Italy earn full wages and don't rely on tips to survive. They left €2 and seemed uncomfortable about it, like they were being cheap. The waitress said it was more than enough. My cousin worked at a small cafe in Lisbon. One morning, an American walked in and asked, "Do you have coffee to go?" My cousin said yes and grabbed a paper cup. The guy added, "Can I get a large? Like the biggest size you have?" My cousin filled a standard to-go cup. The guy looked at it. "That's your large? That's like a small in America." My cousin explained that Portuguese coffee culture is different. People usually drink smaller, stronger espressos or sit down with a regular-sized coffee. The guy sighed. "I need caffeine, man. This won't do it." He ended up ordering 3 cups and drinking them all before leaving. A hotel receptionist in Vienna told me about a guest who called the front desk at 11 at night. The guest was angry because someone knocked on his door and told him to keep it down. He'd been on a video call with his family, talking at normal volume. The receptionist explained that most apartment-style hotels have quiet hours after 10 p.m. Guests are expected to keep noise to a minimum out of respect for neighbors. The American was baffled. "Quiet hours? I'm just talking. It's not even midnight." The receptionist apologized, but said the policy was standard across Austria. The guest hung up, clearly frustrated. Another guest asked the same receptionist why there was no air conditioning in the room. It was June, and the temperature outside was around 70 degrees Fahrenheit. The receptionist explained that many older European buildings don't have central AC because the climate doesn't require it. The guest didn't accept that. "It's hot in here. How do people live like this?" The receptionist offered a fan. The guest reluctantly agreed, but left a bad review, later mentioning the lack of modern amenities. A friend who drove a taxi in Barcelona told me about a passenger who wanted to go to the beach. Mid-ride, the passenger asked, "How far is this in miles?" My friend said about 8 kilometers. The passenger paused. "I don't know what that means. Can you just say miles?" My friend did a quick mental conversion. "About 5 miles." The passenger seemed relieved. "Why doesn't everyone just use miles? It's easier." My friend grinned. "Only 3 countries in the world don't use the metric system: America, Liberia, and Myanmar. Rest of the world is doing fine." A waiter in Paris told me he once served a table of 4 Americans. They ordered appetizers, main courses, and desserts all at once. He tried to explain that in France, meals come in stages. You order appetizers first, then mains, then dessert. They didn't want that. "We know what we want now. Just bring it all together." He brought the food as requested. When everything arrived at once, they seemed overwhelmed by the number of plates. One of them said, "This is too much. We should have spaced it out." The waiter didn't say anything, but he wanted to. Another server in Lyon had a customer who asked for ketchup with her steak. The server hesitated. "We have mustard, pepper sauce, or herb butter," the woman insisted. "No, I want ketchup." He brought her ketchup from the kitchen. She poured it over a perfectly cooked medium-rare ribeye. The chef saw it happen from the pass and looked personally hurt. The server said it was one of the most painful moments of his career. I talked to a barista in Copenhagen who said an American tourist once ordered a latte and asked, "Can I get that iced with extra ice? And can you add vanilla syrup? Caramel drizzle and whipped cream?" The barista stared at her. "We don't have most of that." The tourist looked shocked. "How do you not have vanilla syrup?" The barista explained that Danish coffee shops focus on the coffee itself, not heavy customization. They had milk, sugar, and a few simple syrups. That's it. The tourist left disappointed and grabbed coffee somewhere else. A grocery store worker in Prague told me she once helped an American find bread. He picked up a loaf and asked, "Why is this bread so hard?" She explained it was a traditional Czech sourdough, meant to last several days without preservatives. He put it back. "I want soft bread, like sandwich bread." She pointed him to a different section. He bought it, but said it didn't taste like anything. She told me later that most Czech people prefer bread with texture and flavor, even if it's denser. The American standard of ultra-soft, sweet bread isn't common in Europe. My neighbor in Berlin had an American exchange student stay with her family for a month. On the first night, the student walked into the apartment wearing shoes. My neighbor stopped her. "We don't wear shoes inside." The student looked confused. "Why not?" My neighbor explained that it keeps the floors clean and is a standard practice in many European and Asian households. The student seemed surprised. In America, most people keep their shoes on. My neighbor handed her slippers. The student adjusted, but she mentioned it felt weird at first. The same student also asked why dinner was at 6:30 instead of 8 or 9. My neighbor explained that Germans typically eat dinner earlier than Americans or Southern Europeans. The student said back home her family ate around 7:30 or 8. My neighbor shrugged. Different schedules. Here, we eat early and have more evening time to relax. The student adapted, but she admitted she wasn't used to eating so early. A museum guide in Amsterdam told me about an American tour group that got frustrated during a walking tour. One person asked, "Why don't you have buses for this? Walking for 2 hours is exhausting." The guide explained that Amsterdam's city center is designed for walking and cycling. Cars and buses create congestion. Most locals bike everywhere. The tourist didn't seem satisfied. "In America, we'd never walk this much. We'd just drive." The guide smiled and kept walking. The group made it through, but several people complained about sore feet afterward. A bartender in Dublin told me an American once asked him, "Why is everyone so quiet in here?" It was a traditional Irish pub, early evening, and people were having calm conversations. The bartender said, "It's a pub, not a nightclub. People come here to talk and relax." The American seemed disappointed. "Back home, bars are way louder. There's music, sports on TV, people cheering." The bartender nodded. "We have those too, but this kind of pub is for conversation." The American stayed for one drink and left. A tour guide in Athens said she once had an American ask, "Do you guys take credit cards here, or is it all cash?" She assured him most places take cards. He seemed relieved. "Good. I heard Europe was backwards with payments." She corrected him gently. "Actually, Europe adopted contactless payments before the US did. We're ahead in a lot of ways." He looked surprised but didn't argue. A bookstore owner in Edinburgh told me an American customer once asked why all the books had different covers. "These don't look like the US editions," the customer said. The owner explained that publishers release different cover designs for different markets. The customer frowned. Why would they do that? The owner said it's about marketing and regional preferences. The customer still seemed confused and left without buying anything. A taxi driver in Brussels had a passenger who asked, "Why are all the signs in French and Dutch?" The driver explained that Belgium has multiple official languages. Depending on the region, signs are bilingual or trilingual. The passenger shook his head. "That's so complicated. Why not just pick one language?" The driver laughed. Because Belgium is a multilingual country. It's part of our identity. The passenger didn't say much after that. A history teacher in London told me she once led a tour at the British Museum. An American visitor asked, "Why does England have so much Egyptian stuff?" She explained that during the colonial period, Britain excavated and transported many artifacts. It's a controversial history. The visitor nodded, then asked, "But why didn't Egypt just stop them?" The teacher paused. "It's complicated. Egypt was under different political control at the time." The visitor still seemed confused. Couldn't they just say no? The teacher tried to explain colonialism, power dynamics, and international law, but the visitor didn't seem to grasp it fully. Another museum guide in Berlin said an American once asked her, "When did Germany become a country?" She said, 1871, when the German states unified. The person looked shocked. "Wait, so Germany is younger than America?" The guide confirmed. "Yes, by almost 100 years. The person seemed genuinely surprised. "I always thought Europe was older." The guide explained that while European civilizations are ancient, many modern nation-states are relatively young. A librarian in Dublin told me an American student once asked, "Is Irish the same as English, just with an accent?" The librarian explained that Irish is a completely separate language with Celtic roots. It's taught in schools and used in certain regions. The student was surprised. "I thought everyone in Ireland just spoke English." The librarian said most people do speak English fluently, but Irish is an official language and an important part of Irish identity. A bookstore clerk in Paris said an American tourist asked her, "Do French people learn English in school?" She said yes. Most French students learn English starting in elementary school. The tourist seemed surprised. "Then why doesn't everyone here speak English fluently?" The clerk explained that learning a language in school doesn't guarantee fluency, especially if you don't use it daily. The tourist nodded but still seemed confused. "I just figured everyone in Europe spoke English." A tour guide in Rome had an American ask, "Why is everything so old here?" The guide smiled. "Rome is over 2,000 years old. Many of these buildings and ruins are ancient." The tourist looked around. "Why don't they just rebuild it all? Make it modern?" The guide explained that these are historical sites protected by law. They're part of World Heritage. The tourist shrugged. "I guess. But it feels outdated." A university lecturer in Vienna told me an American exchange student once asked, "Why do Europeans care so much about history?" The lecturer explained that European countries have long, complex histories that directly shape modern politics and culture. The student said, "In America, we focus more on the future." The lecturer nodded. "That's a cultural difference. Europeans often believe you can't understand the present without understanding the past." A geography teacher in Stockholm said an American student once asked, "Isn't Sweden part of Switzerland?" The teacher corrected her. "No, Sweden is a Nordic country in Northern Europe. Switzerland is in Central Europe." The student looked embarrassed. "Oh, I always mix those up." The teacher said it happens more often than people think. A receptionist in Brussels had an American guest ask, "What language do they speak in Belgium?" She said, "It depends on the region. Dutch in the north, French in the south, and German in a small eastern area." The guest seemed overwhelmed. "Why so many languages?" "That's confusing." The receptionist explained that Belgium's linguistic diversity is tied to its history and geography. The guest nodded but still seemed baffled. A train conductor in Switzerland told me an American passenger once asked, "Why does this train cost so much?" The conductor explained that Switzerland has one of the best public transportation systems in the world, but it's also one of the most expensive. The passenger compared it to Amtrak prices in the U.S. The conductor said, "Swiss trains run on time, are clean, and connect the entire country. You're paying for quality and infrastructure." The passenger reluctantly agreed, but still seemed annoyed by the price. A cafe owner in Copenhagen said an American customer once asked, "Why is everything so expensive here?" The owner explained that Denmark has high wages, strong labor protections, and a high cost of living. The customer said, "But a coffee is like $8. That's crazy." The owner nodded. "Yes, but workers here earn a living wage. There's a trade-off." The customer didn't seem convinced. A bookstore worker in Amsterdam told me an American asked, "Why do you have so many books in English?" The worker explained that many Dutch people speak English fluently, and English language books are popular. The American seemed surprised. "I didn't know people here read in English." The worker smiled. "Most Dutch people are multilingual. It's normal." A hotel worker in Madrid said an American guest once complained that nobody spoke English at a local restaurant. The worker explained that while many people in Madrid speak some English, it's not guaranteed everywhere. Spain's official language is Spanish. The guest seemed frustrated. "I thought English was everywhere in Europe." The worker gently explained that Europe has dozens of languages, and English isn't universal. A taxi driver in Athens told me an American passenger asked, "Why is the Parthenon in such bad shape?" The driver explained that it's over 2,000 years old and has survived wars, earthquakes, and looting. The passenger said, "Can't they just fix it?" The driver explained that restoration is delicate and controversial. The goal is preservation, not rebuilding. The passenger didn't seem to understand why they wouldn't just reconstruct it. I was back at the hotel desk in Amsterdam a few months later when a different American family checked in. The dad asked where he could find dinner. I told him most places close by 11. He smiled and said, "Yeah, I read about that. We'll head out now." I was genuinely impressed. His wife asked about ice, and I directed her to the third-floor machine. She thanked me and didn't seem bothered. When they left, I thought about how much things can change when people do a little research. Not every American tourist fits the stereotype. Many come prepared, ask questions respectfully, and adapt quickly. But the ones who don't, they stick in your memory. And honestly, it's not about mocking anyone. It's about recognizing that travel requires flexibility. What works in one country doesn't always work in another. And that's okay. The funniest part is when people assume their way is the default, that everyone else is doing it wrong. Americans aren't the only ones guilty of this. Plenty of Europeans visit the U.S. and complain about portion sizes, tipping culture, and the lack of public transportation. Culture shock goes both ways. The difference is how you handle it. I think the reason Europeans remember these moments so clearly is because they highlight a bigger truth. The world is diverse. Systems that make sense in one place might seem absurd in another. And instead of resisting that, travel should be about curiosity, asking why things are different instead of assuming they're wrong. My favorite story came from a co-worker who worked at a hostel in Prague. An American guest asked him, "Why don't you have peanut butter?" My co-worker said, "We do. It's in the cabinet." The guest opened it and pulled out a jar. He looked disappointed. "This isn't real peanut butter. It's too thick. And there's no sugar." My co-worker explained that European peanut butter is usually just peanuts and salt. No added sugar or oil. The guest sighed. "I miss home." My co-worker smiled. "That's the point of travel. You appreciate what you have, and you learn what others value." That's the lens I bring to every story here. Curiosity over criticism, context over cliches. If that's the kind of travel perspective you want more of, subscribe and stay curious. I kept collecting these stories because they remind me that the world is bigger than any one perspective. Every country has its quirks. Every culture has its logic. And when you're a guest somewhere, the best thing you can do is listen, learn, and maybe laugh at yourself a little. Because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to figure out how to navigate a world that doesn't come with a universal instruction manual. And that's what makes it interesting. Travel safe, stay curious, and maybe pack a plug adapter next time.